Hi, I'm Hazel. We're back at Saturday again, which makes it time to sit down and catch up on the WoW news of the week, what I've been up to, and answer some of your questions. This week in Shadowlands news, there are some changes coming to the way that potion cooldowns work. So in Shadowlands, combat potions will have a 5-minute cooldown that is not affected by combat. This is effectively the death of the pre-pot. This new rule includes utility potions, including speed and invis pots, although of course you still cannot use an invis pot in combat. Mana potions presumably as well, although health potions and health stones will still work as normal. No changes to health pots and health stones, just the rest of them by these new rules. So there are upsides and downsides to this change. The big downside, of course, is that in shorter term combat, like your trash pulls and your dungeon bosses, you are going to have much less uptime on potions. An upside is that because you're not using as many potions, you're spending less gold on potions, so there's that. Also, it makes it a more meaningful decision as to when to use your potion instead of right before combat by default and then just once at some point during combat, especially during some of these shorter encounters. If you're pre-potting and then using a potion with a 1-minute duration, there's not a ton of decision making going on there, so this change should help save you gold and also, make it a little more interesting as to when you're actually going to use the potion. And then if you're doing a super long fight, you've got like one of those 15-minute end of raid fights, you'll be able to get more potion uses in one of those. The reduced potion uptime does sound bad, but it's one of those things that I'm not too upset about because it applies to everybody. Like if everybody else was going to get to keep pre-potting and I wasn't allowed to, then that would suck because I wouldn't do as well. But in my brain, my performance in WoW is always relative to other people. So changes like this are not so much nerfing me as nerfing all of us, and it's not like they're tuning fights with pre-potting in mind, especially when you won't be able to, so I think it's fine. The downside that I can think of, aside from less potion uptime, is potentially reduced demand for potions on the auction house. It might be harder for alchemists to make gold. And then I also think that 5 minutes, while I appreciate what they're trying to do with it, I feel like 5 minutes sounds just like a really long time. I think that 3 minutes might have been more appropriate, but that's just me. Also in the alpha this week, we have some good news for hunters out there. The hunter stable size in Shadowlands is being increased up to 200. So you'll be able to keep 205 total pets, up from 65, because of course you'll be able to have 5 with you. This is just 20 pages of 10. Great news for those who like to collect one of each hunter pet appearance. Now you don't have to look through your journal and decide which one you love the least every time you get a new pet. One thing I would like to see, and I am being nitpicky here, but with all of this extra space, it would be really cool to see better organization, like without having to use an add-on, tabs or categories or filters or that kind of thing. And, while I'm wishing for stuff, it would be cool if that kind of organization was also added to the character list on our character select screen, now that we can have so many characters in one server, but I am stretching here. We also have some new models hitting the Shadowlands alpha that I wanted to highlight. First of all, this frog duck. We don't have an official name for it, but I don't know how you can describe it aside from frog duck. And then I also really enjoyed this model of a baby piranha inside of a fishbowl kind of situation. This thing is just a gigantic fish head with 2 big eyes. And that's the whole thing. It's got a little teeny tiny little tail and a fishbowl. I'm a little bit sick of the bubble that aquatic pets get, so I think the bowl is an interesting twist. Obviously far too small for this fish, but I think it's pretty cute. And then speaking of pets on alpha, actually, I would like to highlight this thing. I don't really know how to describe it. I guess a potential feature. There's this spell that's been data mined, and it's called 9.0 Pet PvP Power, and it says it gives abilities a chance to trigger Fluffy Victory, increasing damage against other players' pets for 15 seconds. 15 seconds? Pet battles are turn-based. I have no good ideas about what on earth that is supposed to be. Battle pets, pet PvP power is something that we're also looking at getting back for regular PvP, and in that case, it's a stat you have on your gear, and that all makes sense to me. Are we getting gear for our battle pets? Is that what this means? I'm so confused. If I'm gonna get a teeny tiny little helmet that has PvP for and then I can put that on my alpaca and then send it into battle, then I'm not mad about that. I would just like more details. And in my life this week, I've been taking it pretty easy in WoW and trying to spend a little bit more time offline. I think that's been helpful for me. I've been spending more time with my aquariums. You'll notice I've moved that tank. It hasn't gone far. It's just on the other side of me, just out of this shot. But I've moved that tank. I discovered a creature in it, which was a whole story. I thought it was a leaf, and then it had legs, and then it was alive. And Turns out, prevailing theory that it was a dragonfly nymph, and I'm very glad I found it before I added any like fish or shrimp to that tank because they can hunt those things. Kind of terrifying. If you're looking for a scary insect to learn more about, look into the life cycle of dragonflies and their hunting habits. They have like these water pressure jaw stabby. It's quite a thing. Anyways, I've removed it now and I'm keeping my eye out for more and then trying to figure out what it is that I want to put in that tank. As uncomfortable as it is that it was just living in there for months unnoticed, they can camouflage really well. You know, the good takeaway is that means that tank can support life. It did great. And questions from this week. Allie asks, I just had a question about picking a class. What keeps you playing Shadow? How do you stick to a class without the urge to switch? So I didn't really stick to Shadow until late mob. For the first couple of expansions I played, I was constantly alt switching. Probably every 3 to 6 months I would have a new main and then I would just get bored and switch again. I think it was partially just finding a class that felt right to me, but also just sort of sticking with it. I think I mostly stuck with it because I just didn't want to, you know, adjust too much with my raiding guild. And then after a certain point, I'd spent so much time with Shadow Priest that everything else feels a little bit wrong. Shadow is just really comfy to me. Even though they've changed it a few times over the years, there's something about it that just feels right to me. And I still do get the urge to switch alts. I will look at something else and I'll get wandering eyes and grass is greener syndrome. And what I do now, because I know myself, is I will level that alt as a brand new character. And then I will level it to 120, I'll start gearing it up, and usually right about when I'm at cloak level 5 or 6, you know, trying to scrape through early horrific visions and like do early dungeons and stuff, right about then I'm like, you know what, this is cool, but it's not a Shadow Priest, and that usually gets it out of my system. But if you get to that point and you're just having more fun, then maybe you should switch. I'm not very good at talking people out of altaholism. I'm a bit of an enabler in that regard. And Urine asks, how do you avoid burning out? So that could be taken to mean burning out on WoW or burning out on content creation. So I'll answer both. In WoW, I think the thing that keeps me going is that I dabble in so many different types of the game that I'm never doing the same thing for crazy long. I will kind of dip in and out of like solo world content, farming old content for collectibles, raiding, Mythic Plus, and PvP. I'm never doing all of those things at once. I'm usually doing maybe 2. And then when I get tired of one or when that thing calms down for like a season or whatever, I'll just kind of mix another one in and kind of drift between these different modes of content. So WoW feels to me like a bunch of different games and it kind of evolves over time. So I think that helps. But I always encourage people, if you're bored, if you're burned out, take a break. You don't have to play WoW. And taking a break from WoW doesn't mean you're betraying it forever. You can always come back, especially right now when there's new content coming, but like later. I wouldn't judge anybody for taking a break from WoW these days. As far as content creation, I don't know if I've figured out the answer there, although I know that recently I've been doing a bit better just because I will always prioritize eating and sleeping when it comes to that. If I reach a situation where I have a video that I want to get done, but it's bedtime, I will always choose bedtime. I will always choose bedtime. I'm beyond the stage of all-nighters. If I have to just have reduced output, then I'll just do that. Ideally, I plan better so it doesn't get to that point, but I will always prioritize getting enough sleep, getting the right food, getting a little bit of exercise, because once I start to kind of ignore those and push past the exercise and food and like showers and sleeping, that's when everything seems to start to fall apart for me. So as long as like basic human needs are met, then I can go nuts, and that's been working better for me. And that has been my week. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions you would like me to answer on one of these news videos, please leave it in the comments of the most recent one. Let me know what you think, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye. Hey, kitty. Hi. You got anything to say?